back to MidnightO2 Season 1, Episode 14. This is your host, Amy. How's your day going? Because today I have a special guest on my episode, and her name is Kimi Rutledge. She's a professional actress from Seattle, Washington. Yay!
Hi.
Yeah, why don't you
So excited to
introduce
be.
yourself a little bit?
Yeah, hi, I'm Kimi Rutledge. Like Amy said, I'm a professional actress in Seattle, Washington, and I'm also a comedian. So I do stand up.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming here to talking to me
Yeah,
about your story. Yeah.
of course. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, so this is my first time talking to an actress, so I'm actually pretty nervous. Um,
Oh no.
yeah,
You don't have to be nervous at all.
okay.
Actors and actresses are really chill.
Yeah,
We're really
because
chill.
I feel like you guys are like so cool doing with so many acting and always have like a lot of stories to tell. That's why I wanted to invite you.
Oh, cool. That makes me so happy. I'm so
Yeah.
excited.
So first of all, I'd like to ask you, what inspired you to go into acting?
I think for me, ever since I was a young girl, I've always been fascinated by other people. And I've always been fascinated by what it would be like to be another person. And I also just love stories and storytelling. And I was always drawn to the screen when TVs, even like TV shows or film or even commercials would come on. I would always want to be the person in it. But I didn't know how that was possible. So I would just sort of dress up as a young kid on my own and try to trick my family members into thinking I was someone else. But I was like 6 years old, so my disguises were terrible. But I was trying. I was just trying to live like other people. And from there, I just really started getting into filmmaking. And then I started acting for short films and for my classmates. And then it started to just ramp up more and more. And then I graduated and I was sort of like, okay, I've obviously been doing this my whole life. Why not pursue it?
Wow. That's really amazing because I don't know a lot of people that just focus on one thing since they were little. It's like dream come true though, like if you think about it.
Right. Right. Well, I think everyone has a passion in some
Mm-hmm.
way, and it can be a career, it could be in a hobby, it could be even just like a relationship. I feel just really lucky that I can even be pursuing any of my passions.
Yeah, for me, I've always just looked at writing, so here I
Yeah,
am.
absolutely. Writing and
That's really
acting are really
cool.
similar in the
Mm-hmm.
sense of creating characters and storytelling.
Yeah, like I love talking about storytelling. Do you want to talk about like your process going into the character?
Yeah, totally. For me, whenever I get a character, it's really important for me to have context for the scene. Usually, they'll give you one or two scenes that you record yourself doing and send in, since everything is, self-taped now because of the pandemic. Um, so I usually will start with breaking down the script and figuring out within my scene what is the character arc and how
Mm-hmm.
does that fit in the story. And so it's really important for me to have context and be able to read the whole story. And from there, I try to figure out, okay, what is this character? Why is this character doing these things? What exactly was the writer thinking in terms of the story? So almost I approach it like through a writer's eyes. And I try to pick up hints in the script because if they're a good writer, they'll put interesting little hints in the script that tell you a little bit more about the character. And if you're not careful, you can miss those details. Yeah, so essentially, I just collect as much information as I can, and then sort of make my own choices on what is motivating this person. And yeah,
Wow.
that's sort of it.
That's a lot of work actually. So you kind of have to understand what the other actors are
Yeah,
doing, also like what the writer is thinking.
right. Yeah, it is a lot of work. It's a lot of reading, and a lot of mental preparation.
Yeah. Do you currently have an agent?
I do, yes. I
Wow.
do. I have an agent. for LA, and I have an agent for Seattle.
So are you sometimes you fly back and forth?
I haven't had to fly because
Yeah,
I didn't really
COVID.
start, yeah, because of the COVID. So everything's been remote. It's just been through self-tape.
Oh, that's really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Interesting. Do
But
you? Mhm.
sorry, I was just gonna say the work in Seattle and the work in LA is very different. So usually, if it's an LA self-tape, it's a lot more work. And Seattle tends to be more commercial, so it tends to be a bit easier.
Is it because like the fields are kind of different, like the requirements, or like the type or the mediums are different?
Yeah, I would say that it's mostly how much work is required into the audition. So if it's TV film, it's definitely going to be, it's not going to be from Seattle. It's going to be from LA for me. And those usually require you to kind of show more of a character, whereas commercials here are usually like pretty short little scenes, or even just voiceover, or even just photos. So it's a lot less time consuming to audition for commercials, in my opinion.
And you're currently based in Seattle, Washington, right?
Yes, I am.
Have you ever considered like moving to LA with the Hollywood thing, or I don't know,
uh,
like I don't know much about acting, so.
right, yeah, no. Actually, right now, this is sort of new, and I'm learning it too because I'm new
Mhm.
to the LA market. Um, is that a lot of things are going to be virtual now, and so a lot of the auditions have opened up a lot more internationally,
Oh.
because now a lot of actors who couldn't be in LA can
Mhm.
send in a self tape, and they can just sort of be wherever. And usually there'll be accommodations if you book something, depending on how high budget something is. So people will fly you out if you book it and you're, going to set. But I think, yeah, I think
Yeah.
the protocol is a little different, but yeah, it's not necessary yet
Mhm.
for me, but I was definitely considering it. But since all of this stuff has happened, I'm like, okay, I'll
Yeah.
just do self tapes, and if I book
Mhm.
something, we'll see. You know,
Yeah, that is really cool
yeah,
because my last guest was from LA. We were talking about the differences between Seattle and LA, and I didn't know that there's like a difference in like acting world too.
yeah. It's super different in the acting
Mhm.
world because TV and film don't like to shoot in the Seattle area because our taxes are so high,
Oh,
and yeah,
that's a lot
which is
of
so annoying.
insight. Is this like okay to talk about?
Yeah, totally. No,
Okay,
no,
okay.
totally. This is totally okay to talk about. The taxes are just too high, and so the casting directors in Seattle have gone to Olympia, the state capital, and like
Mm.
protested and stuff, and essentially, or not really protested, but just went
Mhm.
to talk to you know
Right.
politicians, representatives about like, hey, could you could lower the taxes and film would want to shoot here more. And
Oh,
so it's sort of like,
that's
oh, if only
why.
we lowered the tax, we would have more TV and film. But they
Yeah.
usually go to Vancouver or Portland.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that. Well, thanks for telling me that. Now I know
Yeah,
more
yeah,
insights. Yeah,
yeah.
would you identify yourself as an Asian American actress?
Yes, I would.
Are you are you Japanese American from what I.
Yes, I'm half Japanese and
Okay,
half white. Yeah.
that is really cool. What is the most difficult thing being an Asian American actress in America specifically?
I would say the most difficult thing for me tends to be the scope of roles I can play. Um, because Asians have historically been excluded from Hollywood in a lot of ways, and up until like very recently, white people were playing Asian roles.
Mhm.
So a lot of Asian actresses and actors just have not had the same level of opportunity that white actors have. And so also there's a very narrow worldview about Asia, and they sort of lump all of us together, like they're like
Yeah, like
Asia, but we're like
mhm.
so many different places.
Right.
So also the stories and the characters can be a little bit like a stereotype. And so that's nothing I've really had to worry about too much, but it's just that I tend to be more pigeonholed as like a nerd or like a hacker or edgy, and I think it's partially to do with that I'm half Asian and I have a sort of look, and it's sort of inevitable because I mean Hollywood is a lot about knowing your look and knowing how to use your look to get jobs essentially. And so I know that I have a certain look being Asian, and there's those stereotypes, and it's all kind of mixes together. And I don't really blame, like, I don't really blame anyone for having those sort of roles to be Asian American. I just think it's repetitive.
Yeah, so from what I know, there's like a lot of stereotypes about like Asian actress and actors. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
wondering how you feel about those. Like, could you talk more a little bit more about it?
Yeah, I would say a lot of times when people who aren't Asian try to write Asian roles, it feels like they're sort of coming from the stereotype of they're really smart and they're kind of exotic. And that's something that Asian women have had to struggle with, that certain trope of them being exotic or kind of mystical, like Freaky Friday. They have I don't know if you know that movie, but they eat a fortune cookie, a mother-daughter eat a fortune cookie at a Chinese restaurant and like switch bodies. And that's sort of a trope that pops up a lot, is that like Asians are exotic and weird and different, and they don't usually get the lead roles, and they don't usually get the white lead like love interest, which is why that one movie, To All the Boys I Love Before, I think, was that what it was? That movie was really cool to me because it was cool to see an Asian actress as the lead for a rom-com. I was like, oh, that's awesome. So it was getting better, and I haven't had to experience that. I think I've been lucky, but I have noticed and sort of laughed at, like, I get a lot of the same kind of roles of like nerd or like smart girl or hacker or weird.
Well, then what are some roles that you will want to try and want to get, like, you want to act later on in the future?
Yeah. Well, I would love to do, I really like dramatic acting. I would love to have a really, I don't know, I guess a really gritty role. That would be fun eventually. That would be really fun. And it would be really fun to do a sitcom, a comedy role, because I think that would be really light and would be fun to perform. And I mean, comedy's very hard, but I think, honestly, I'd be happy with whatever. I would have loved to do, it would be really fun to be in a movie that's set in the past.
Oh.
Like a period piece or something. That would be really fun because it would just be cool to be transported to a different
That is
decade.
so cool. Oh my gosh. Like the writer me be like, oh, maybe I should write that. I should write something about it.
You should.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, like I know you like comedy and you also do stand-up comedy, right?
Yes.
Yeah, do you want to talk to my audience more about it? Because I've always been so curious about like stand-up comedy, and I imagine it to be like so difficult. And when your first time like talking about a topic in front of everyone, how was that like?
Man, it's really nerve-wracking. Definitely my first time was rough. I totally bombed. It was terrible. But it was, I don't know, I think I've grown thick skin over my life to the point where I can just sort of laugh at myself. And I started stand-up because it scared me. And I was like, you know what, I want to start doing things that scare me because I might realize that I really like them and that my fear was unfounded. I didn't need to have it. And so I did it, and I actually really liked it. And I didn't think it was as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I think people would be pleasantly surprised. I mean, I don't know. In Seattle, people are really nice. So I don't know if where you are it would be like as nice wherever you live. But yeah, it was a really positive experience, and I just learned from bombing, which is essentially like no one laughs. You learn from that because you learn what doesn't work, and then you go back and you edit your jokes, and then you try it again and again, and until it's, yeah,
Dang.
polished.
Wow. Where do you get like inspiration with all the skits and everything?
Yeah, that's a good question. I kind of keep a note open on my phone whenever I just sort of have a observation that I think is funny or could be developed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually just sort of will pop into my head, or sometimes I'll sit down and I'll just write from a prompt, what do I want to talk about today? And then I'll just write, kind of freehand write. And sometimes I'll get ideas from that. It's kind of varies, but usually it'll pop into my head, or I even just say it out loud without thinking. And I'm like, oh, that could be a funny joke if I, work on it. Yeah.
That's actually very similar to my writing process. Yeah, I always
Really?
carry like a notebook. I like to handwrite too, so I just carry it,
yes.
and I write it with pencils, and I'll just write down whatever lines that popped up on my
That
head.
is so
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, so what's your writing process like?
I sometimes will wake up in the middle of the night just because something pops up in my head. It's like 3 a.m. and I'll be like, I have to get up to write it, and I write that
Oh my
line down.
God.
I was like, why am I crazy? But I'll do anything for writing. So
That
that's
is
me.
so cool. I love that. I love that. My parents are writers.
Oh, really? That's
So
really
I
cool.
really have always loved writing and writers. I so respect you guys.
Honestly, it's so difficult to be a writer these days. You tell people you're a writer, and they're like, "What? Is that even a job?"
Right. No,
Yeah.
that's why I respect it so much. It's so cool. It's so necessary, and people sleep on it a lot, but it's like everywhere.
Yeah.
That's how we communicate. That's how we consume and tell stories.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult for like actors and actresses as well because how do you explain to your Asian parents, like typical Asian conservative parents, that you're going to do acting for the rest of your life? I feel like
Right.
a lot of kids are worried about that.
Right. For me, I think I was lucky because my mom, it's interesting, my mom actually comes from a lot of entertainers. We're related to this guy named Enomoto Kenichi, and he went by Enoken. And he was a famous vaudevillian actor, which is like a stage comedy, and he was in a few movies way back in the 1900s. And he was very famous in Japan. And then that sort of love of film kind of went down to my grandpa, and he wanted to be an actor, but he wasn't quite good enough, so he ended up working behind the scenes. And so he worked at Disneyland, he worked at Disney, and worked at Toho Entertainment to distribute Godzilla and stuff like that. So it's always been this love of film in our family. And on my mom's side, who's my Japanese side, and I think so she's been very accepting of it because my Japanese side has been very international. They sort of lived in between LA and Japan. So they're not the typical Asian, from that typical stereotypical Asian perspective, but I have talked to a lot of Asian actors with that background. And I know that if you have someone in your life from that background, or even on another relatable level, some people just will be like kind of scoff at, artistic careers, and I'm sure you totally relate to that. Like someone, like you just said, like writer, really,
Right.
okay, how do you make money? How do you do anything? And so I think we face that a lot as artists, and I think the most important thing is to remember is that if you love what you're doing, that will show, that passion will show. And if your parents love you, they will accept you. And if they can't accept it, that's not your fault.
Wow.
It's not your fault.
Wow, that was a very powerful message. I wish everybody like who's having a hard time chasing their dreams could hear that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I just want people to know that it is possible, and that if you don't feel supported, there are always people out there who can support you. And it doesn't mean you have to, disown your parents or anything, but, even if they don't give you that support right away, I can say that a lot of people learn to, and even if they don't you don't need it because you have so much support behind you.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many supportive people in this industry.
Wow. If
Yeah.
you could say like one thing to kids who want to become actors and actresses, what would that one thing be?
I would say, oh, that's a good question. I would say always be yourself. I think that the most important thing in acting is being authentic and being honest. And if you're constantly denying who you are and you're constantly trying to be like other people, you'll never fully unlock the treasure trove of, knowledge that you have inside of you. And I feel like the most important thing is just being yourself and embracing all of your quirks and putting those into the characters that you play. Because every character I play, I feel like I give them a little piece of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very vulnerable, but it feels good. And I would say, in the face of all these trends, in the face of everything, just be proud of yourself and be unabashedly yourself.
Wow. I actually said something very similar on my book launch a while ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was like, be yourself because I'm always honest when it comes to writing. So I feel very vulnerable and naked when it's my writing. I feel like it's probably the same when it comes to like acting or like similar.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, that's interesting. Wow.
Well, I guess we're artists in the end.
I know. Oh my God.
Yeah. So at the end of this, I just want to ask you, what's the best thing about being an actress?
Ooh.
Your
Man,
personal experience.
Yeah. It's so hard to pick, but I guess the corny answer is that I get to do what I love to do. But if I'm giving a more logistical answer, I would say I really like the schedule constantly changing. I know a lot of people are like, really benefit from routine.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely would benefit from routine. I have to find ways I can put routine into days because, the work is so random.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like it because I like being kept on my toes and I like having to improvise and kind of adapt.
Wow.
So that's really, and I get bored so easily. So it's kind of fun to have like new projects to work on all the time.
Yeah, Kimi, I'm actually really inspired by what you're telling me, like I feel like, oh yeah, I'm doing what I love to and I have met someone like you're doing what you love. It's definitely really, really good.
Oh,
yeah, I'm really happy that you're
happy.
doing this. Yeah, and what is is there a platform or like an email address you could share with my audience if they want to reach you at?
Yes, you can follow me at my Instagram, and my email is on my Instagram page. It's at Kimi Rutledge, KimiRutledge. Kimi Rutledge.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks, Kimi, again for taking the time out and scheduling this with me and sharing all these insights with me.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was awesome. This was so fun.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And we'll say good night to our audience. Okay, good night.
Good night.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.